there is, well, it goes back to the volt instead of the bolt. Who do you think is going to buy a vehicle like that, and what are they looking for? Were they looking for a small economy vehicle, and that's what your market, or are you more along the lines of where Tesla went? And who's going to buy something like that? People with money.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that was Tesla's, one of Tesla's
Is the Bolt a
successful
small economy
insights.
car?
I'm not sure what it is.
I think in the eyes of the consumer,
In
it
the eyes of the
is.
consumer,
but,
certainly is.
But when they
Consumer,
look at the
economy car.
sticker price on that versus the sticker price on I don't know the
Spark-
Versa I was driving last
or
week,
that was Sonic.
that was like
Sonic.
under 19 grand,
Right.
Versus something that is
Then they
I'll come
choke.
back to my
it's
original
bumping 40.
statement about it's all the economics. In the end,
Well,
when you get past early adopters and you get downstream, it's like everything else. There's a strong economics force that comes into play.
Yeah, I mean, if you're selling to a price-conscious customer, that's a tough sell still. And,
Right.
and Elon Musk is not selling, by and large, to a price-conscious. He's selling to a conscious customer, right? He's selling to a
Fairly well-off.
a
we should talk
well-off,
about him
affluent,
later. We should talk about him later.
You know,
Yeah.
status-conscious
when we have the full
Fine, all right, else.
full thing. So why don't you talk about?
The weather,
Yeah, there you go.
the tigers.
So I see the
There are no professional
I see
sports
the
teams
fall
in Detroit.
festivals.
No, that's
in,
right.
Yeah, yeah, oh yeah.
Not
I'm gonna be
professional.
going
No.
away to.
You're going.
So-
The last time they had a festival, you went away.
I
What do you
know.
go away every
It's
time?
like,
there's-
no, they have it the same week that I have to go to
Festival in
Frankfurt for the
Brighton
show.
I
All
go
the-
to this week.
Every 2
No,
years.
Good with that.
It's,
Go where?
Brighton,
it starts
North
Tuesday.
Flint.
The press days are Tuesday.
And we
next
have
Tuesday.
we have
When do
a
you leave?
I'm leaving
we have
Saturday.
a
I'm
food
going there early
festival
for
that
this
goes
other
off
stuff.
Go
downtown
tomorrow.
several times a year in Brighton.
Well, yeah, I'll walk
Yeah,
around
yeah.
tomorrow. Yeah.
I can
Unless I
walk
have to
home
work.
from there,
Unless you
which
have
makes
to
it
work.
convenient.
That's very convenient.
Yeah. They took one of my
My normal watering
daycare
hole,
and one of the
I can't
reporters
walk
in my
home.
bureau and sent him down to South
But
Carolina.
since my buddy owns it,
He's standing
For
around.
the-
I have a place
for
to
the
crash every
There you
time.
go.
He's standing around in a hurricane,
So, come to the-
Getting wet.
getting wet. I don't know why we do that in the media. Anyway, that's
Well, it's your
discussion.
TV though.
Well, yeah. I mean,
That'd be something, right?
Yeah.
Didn't Dan Rather make his career out of?
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
What was it? A
hurricane? I forget which one, but yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Standing around a hurricane.
So I'm sure that there are many young reporters who are aware of that, who are just,
And they're just like
dying to
yeah.
dying to be in a hurricane.
I
There was a
think so.
film clip on one of the social media outlets. I don't know if you guys saw it. And I don't know if it was staged or not because it was so dumb. And it was a reporter there and, the all-weather gear. And he's talking like that. And
Yeah.
two people stroll by in the background.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
I have to talk to my friend
think I
who
was a mystery smart
lives right in
place
one of the barrier islands outside of Savannah.
So it was like you go to
Apparently, he
this
didn't have any
place
real
and
damage,
you
but I'll have to
they
see
say,
how it
"Stand on
was.
that spot."
Right.
And for some reason, you wouldn't
No,
be able
just
to
let 'em down in
stand.
Bahamas.
Like it was,
No doubt. No doubt.
Yeah, that's weird.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's why.
Or
it
at
was
least a
mystery
couple of
spot.
the
You had to
islands.
pay money.
Actually, Nassau's
Pay money
not
to
that bad
experience
off.
this.
That's
Was that
right.
right?
Experience the mystery.
Just
For
depends where
them,
it
it was the
touched down.
regular,
Like
normal
magnetic field or
hurricane level
something,
that
yeah.
they're ready
Maybe a
for.
gravity hole.
Having a Cat 5 stall out over the top of you
For a day.
for a
Maybe it's
day
run by
is just,
people who are going to be at Area
knock
51 on the
Oh, God,
20th.
yeah.
not much left
Yeah.
standing.
Oh yeah, I've heard a little bit about that.
Yeah,
Weird. Anyway,
yeah. Well, they got time on their hands.
I wish.
So, Mike, are you going to Area 51 on September 20th?
No.
Why
I've already
September
known-
20th?
Because
They're
they're all
having an open house. I
That's
guess.
the open
They're-
house day.
They're going to show us the
they-
corpses of the aliens.
they want to go see the
Do
aliens.
you know how much of your taxpayer
Mama
dollars
five
is
day
now being spent to protect against that?
Against aliens or
Against everybody going into Area 51.
Yeah.
or going into Nellis Air Force Base, which would be.
Yeah, which I don't think they really
It's a
want
starting
either.
point, but yeah. Area 51, actually, to try to get to it is a dangerous hike if the weather's bad.
Yeah.
People will die if they try it.
Could they drive?
That road gets blocked. That's regularly blocked. They have a program worked out with Air Force security and the sheriffs. You can read all about that. That's been well documented for years.
Could you take a Hummer?
But if you start to try, they can cover anything that you can do unless you're an extreme off-roader. And for that, they've got helicopters.
we had the
but-
Gladiator in the studio last week.
Yeah.
The gravity.
Yeah, I saw that.
That thing. You get right in there. Yeah. It's trail rated.
It's trail rated and all that, but those areas, they have vehicles that are better than trail rated to cover those areas for security.
I've got one word for that. Impossible.
No, I think
No.
they can probably take you out if you show up in your Gladiator.
Yes.
They'll blow the top hat right
And
off that.
besides that, there is nothing that can outrun an Apache in that sense. So,
That's true.
Yeah, I'm not going to be visiting there. I'm going to Frankfurt instead. That'll be fine.
yeah, I think. Now you're of course going because it's you're going to look for the automotive vehicles that are in use and understand that and their future production capability.
That's right.
Yeah. See, he's got this worked out.
It's legit.
So where are you staying in Frankfurt? Any place good?
Oh, my colleagues booked a place, and I forget where. This is all stuff I'm doing tomorrow. I'm going to figure it all out, get it in my head. But yeah, I mean, somewhere downtown near
Yeah.
the hall. And then I'm only going to be there for a little while, and then I'm going to do these side trips. So
That'll be more fun than the show,
I think so.
probably.
Yeah,
More,
yeah.
more
No, I'm pretty
educational.
Confident. I'm pretty confident that's true. Yeah.
Are you going to train or are you going to
train
drive?
train around? Yeah, I guess as far as I can tell, unless somebody lends me a car. So yeah.
The trains will get you to where you need to go.
Yep. It's pretty magical. I always enjoy it. German train system is
That's right.
a wonder. Yeah, so I'll do that, and then I'll come back here and collapse for like a week.
That's right.
I wish, but yeah. No, it should be an interesting trip.
Well, especially getting to see the two EV plants.
Yeah,
That's
no,
pretty
it'll be.
worthwhile.
Yeah, no, I'm
would
definitely interested in that, and they're in. It's a pretty interesting experiment they're running in Germany. I mean, they're got the industry that kind of props things up economically. They're kind of going to put it through the ringer and see if it all comes out okay.
Yeah.
And that's going to be interesting.
It is. They just had a good month, though, in Germany.
Did they?
Sales
On
wise.
sales?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, but not
really
overall economy-wise.
The
No,
overall
no,
economy
not at all.
is shaky, and and it's well, I don't want to talk about that, but
Yeah,
We won't even
will.
get into
In fact,
Brexit.
we'll start soon because I think we're ready to go live. Watch Autoline After Hours live at Autoline.tv every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 12 p.m. Pacific. You can subscribe to this podcast for free by searching for Autoline in iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion. Lear, a global leader in automotive seating and electrical systems. And by Borg Warner, propulsion solutions that support a clean, energy-efficient world.
All right, everybody, welcome to Autoline After Hours. Gary, you're looking good.
Thank you, John. I had an interesting automotive experience this week.
What?
This will make our friend Maury Callum feel very happy.
Maury at Ford, head of
Ford,
design.
design at Ford, and his former colleague, Jerry McGovern at Land Rover, not feel so well. So I'm driving in a Evoque, a Range Rover Evoque, and a guy came up to me and he said, "Is that your Edge out there?" And he was serious.
And he was-
absolutely serious.
there you go.
So there you have it.
There you go.
$50,000 worth of price sticker.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that voice you just heard was Joe White from Reuters, who's joined us for the show again. Good Joe, always great to have you on board here.
Good to be here.
And we got to let everybody know our special guest today is Mike Tracy from the Agile Group, or Agile. How do you say it? Agile?
6 of one, half dozen of the other.
Agile.
Agile will work. I mean, we respond to anything with a check attached, right?
That's right. So give us a quick snapshot, real quick thumbnail, your background. You're in what? Engineering, manufacturing?
I started out in automotive product design. Did fuel systems, and I hate to tell you this, but it was carburation. I used to do that. I've worked on design and manufacturing of Lionel trains.
Oh.
I've done large-scale assembly plants, engine plants, aircraft plants, and all those fun kinds of things. And lots of work in terms of operations improvement and trying to take companies that don't make money and help them make money.
So are these improvements of the plants that you originally laid out, or?
I actually did one of those once, actually. Back in the defense boom, we built a plant down in the Carolinas to take, back in the Reagan days. And then when things scaled down in the 90s, they were worried about the plant closing. They asked me to come in and help make certain they were competitive. I did walk in, and I told them one thing. I said, I helped build this place. I am not here to shut it down.
Well, there
Good
you
for
go.
you. So, okay, you work with car companies a lot.
Yes.
And are these car companies the traditional guys, the Ford, FCA, or are they the startup companies, or both?
Both. I've done work actually with Toyota, Ford, FCA, Chrysler, whichever way you want to refer to them, and then General Motors, of course. I've done work with Tesla. I've done work with Rivian.
Tell us a bit about Rivian. What do you think? I mean, these guys have become sort of the darling of the EV crowd right now. Everybody's sort of gaga about an electric truck and SUV.
You're looking at a founder who is very passionate about his product.
You're talking R.J. Scarinich.
I'm talking about RJ, and a team that he's put around him at the core side of it who have believed in that and have followed him down through Florida, back up here, and are now putting forth what should be a very interesting set of vehicles.
So they bought a plant in Normal, Illinois that used to be owned by Mitsubishi.
Yes,
And that's a 2.4 million square foot plant.
I'm very familiar with that.
So-
One of the plants I helped work on to get originally designed and built.
When it was
there
Diamond Star.
opened. When it was Diamond Star.
And are you working with Rivian now in Normal?
I'm not doing any work with them right now, but I assisted them in some of the planning, both for the purchase of it and for some of the conceptual understanding of how it should be adapted and what could be done to accommodate their phase build plans.
So as you do that, one of the things that I think is interesting is you look at the industry starting to shift, at least in some way, toward electrification, electric vehicles. One of the questions is, will factories look the same? Will they need the same footprint? Will there be as many parts coming in and out? And some people say, oh, there'll be way fewer parts coming in and out, much simpler to build. And then you look at Tesla and you say, I don't know about that. It looks like they've got a fairly complex process there. I mean, what do you see when you were looking at Normal? I mean, what was your kind of assumption about what it would be different about building an electric vehicle like that compared to the vehicles that were built there prior?
It's very interesting in the sense that you've got a body. The body, generally speaking, is not going to come in its initial color or coating finish that it's going to need. So you're going to have some kind of coating, quote unquote. Most of us call that a paint process. And then if you look at the physical structure of vehicles, you still got trim, there's a chassis, and then there's a final assembly build. Almost all vehicles go together in a relatively similar manner. You're still going to have interiors. Actually, you're looking at maybe at more content in some of the interiors, depending on how they're done. If you look at some of the futuristic concepts, but you still got seats, you've got an infotainment system, you've got coverings, soundproofing, doors, glass, you've got material around the powertrain. Now, whether you're sitting on top of a battery, you've got some other configuration. That's somewhat similar to a fuel tank, although it's actually, in and of itself, battery packs are extremely complex to build, test, and then install. So in the end, you wind up with similar part counts, built in similar manner. The biggest change you'll see is like any other plant, what's built modularly by a supplier very nearby and delivered in versus what you build in-house.
Yeah, I suppose the battery could be one of those things that's built off-site. Not necessarily, but could be.
If you build a battery off-site, now you're looking at a very, very large transportation expense. If you're going to build batteries, $250,000 a year, 500,000 if you look at some of the more efficient sized locations for assembly, it gets to be very, very difficult to package, build, and then transport those battery pack systems, particularly since they now, when they're in the final assembled state, generally have integrated electronics, integrated cooling requirements, and related activities, which is going to lead to a substantial transportation problem. So you build them on sites when you have to build high volumes.
So you build the battery packs and the vehicles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Think it's not significantly different than what you'll see with what Hyundai's done, or Toyota typically has done in many areas. Honda's done it, where you've got powertrain assembly on site, final
So
assembly.
basically you have an engine plant and a transmission plant, and then that feeds into the assembly plant.
Generally not transmissions. They're generally speaking mostly just engine assembly because it's simpler.
But when you
and
say
more
engine
predictable.
assembly, you're talking final dress, right?
no.
You're not talking putting in all the pistons and crank and all that.
Talking piston,
You are?
crank
Okay.
assembly. There are a number of plants in the U.S. that do that. Gary's probably been through a good series of them.
But most assembly plants do not have a contiguous engine plant.
If they were being designed and they weren't legacy plants, generally speaking, they would. I've had discussions with knowledgeable manufacturing executives, and if you really wanted to do it right, an efficient automotive complex is roughly 500,000 units a year with phased models that allow them to do continuous rolling launches so they can staff effectively and keep people trained for that process. And then they'll have economies of scale to do powertrain assembly and similar types of activities.
Mike, I want to go back to what Joe was asking, though. I mean, I think this is really important. That there are some people who basically say there is the opportunity for there to be more startup companies today because of the fact of the simplification
The
of
alleged simplification.
the alleged
Yeah.
simplification
Right.
of making an electric vehicle versus all the complexity of normal engines and transmissions and braking systems and on and on and on and on. Are you saying that that's completely wrong?
The wreckage of startup car companies hasn't been enough evidence already. It should be relatively obvious that designing and building cars, in particular, any kind of, let's call it light vehicle, in volume, and with a supply chain to match it with the reliability, safety, the networks and everything else required for service, parts distribution, and so on, you're talking about a business that requires very deep pockets in order to be sustainable and profitable, because they all are operating with actually relatively narrow margins.
Well,
and
but
then
I mean,
try to
any
go-
car out in the lot right now has got narrow margins. I mean, that's no different.
That's right. The electric vehicles and those aren't going to be any different.
But the point, I think, it sounds like your point is that the capital investment and the technical know-how and the discipline around testing and validation, that all of that is essentially the same.
It is
It's not
essentially the
greatly
same.
reduced just because it's a battery in a sled.
I think the problem that most people who don't know manufacturing make is they look at an electric EV motor and they go, hey, there's only a few parts in here, and they look at an internal combustion engine and go, wow, there's hundreds and hundreds of parts in here, so ergo the EV is easier. But they don't look at the total system because, as you point out, Mike,
That's right.
battery is horrifically complicated, has probably as many parts in it as an internal combustion engine does, and probably, to your point, is much harder to assemble than an engine.
It is much harder to assemble and generally requires heavy-duty automation to do it in volume effectively, which is why some people build gigafactories to do the cell builds. And then if you look at what it takes to build efficient, clean, well-packaged battery packs, that's a heavily automated process as well.
Right. So basically, if you're not Elon, that basically you're probably going to outsource the building of your battery.
You have to find somebody who's willing to bet a lot of money to build a battery and subsystems to feed a company who's got a relatively low economic probability of success, especially since every one of the major car companies is now focused on doing and competing in that arena. The very earliest competitors in most area where there's some level of innovation have a chance to survive, but generally speaking then get acquired by, the large people who have the cash reserves to acquire them.
So let me ask you, going back to Rivian. So Ford put $500 million in Rivian and said that they would work with Rivian. So in addition to the $500 million, there are people from Ford, I understand, you probably know, Joe, that are embedded in the Design and Engineering Center in Plymouth, which is, for those not from around here, is about 10 miles from where we're sitting right now.
Right.
So is that got the possibility of success? I guess everything has the possibility.
In addition to that $500 million, they got a quarter of $1 billion in line of credit to do manufacturing equipment, and they've had substantial investments from others as well.
$700
on the
million
front end,
from Amazon.
among others, which you want. You
So
have
they
to
got a lot of
ask yourself
dough.
lots of
You
things.
said earlier
with
you
a
need
lot of
pockets.
money, you can do well. They bought an existing plant. They didn't have to go through the problem of, building one and trying to do something with it. It actually came with a lot of equipment involved in that too. There's lots of robots
Could they
available.
repurpose that stuff?
That's one of the things that RJ liked about it, as others did. There were rows and rows of relatively new, and there were rows and rows of old robots, but for the volumes that they're talking about initially, that's more than enough there, so they don't have to, So that all came at a very, very cheap price,
They got it for chump change.
less than chump change.
I think he said he paid like $15 million in cash for the plant, which probably cost over $1 billion to build.
There was, I actually have from the
16
original
million?
auction house, I have the list of everything that came with that. I'll just give you something to consider. If you're going to do metal panels, it came with a stamping plant equipped with 6 very large transfer presses. The average cost, which if you were trying to replace those, was $100 million each, one of which was relatively new and designed to stamp aluminum. So you have all those things. Came with a mold shop,
So it's
came
a
with a
bargain.
paint shop, although any paint shop that's been shut down to be restarted is very expensive to do.
Hey, and let's get into the whys of that. But first, we got to take a quick break right here. We've got a great sponsor of the show, Borg-Warner, and here's a message from them.
The world is changing at an ever-increasing pace. No matter what the mode of transportation, there is always the need for an efficient propulsion system. And that's exactly what Borg-Warner has been doing since the earliest days of the automotive industry. We create innovative mobility technologies that reduce energy consumption and emissions while improving performance. Our proven track record has made us an industry leader in forward-looking propulsion solutions for combustion, hybrid, and electric vehicles.
Okay, we're back talking with Mike Tracy here, and you just said if you shut down a paint shop for a while, it's real expensive to get it up and going again. Why?
Well, it has to do principally with the fluids side of it. You have, most paint shops have a central paint kitchen, as they call them, which is where everything gets pumped from. And while you can put water in the lines and do other things, you rapidly start to encounter degradation in the system, so you wind up replacing that. Many of the booths are water-based, and in most cases, they're old, and it's like anything else. If you shut something down for a while, when you try to turn it back on, it tends to have some issues.
So like that old can of paint you have in the basement that you have to build it up for a long time.
Among
Great
other
analogy,
things.
Gary.
You open
get
it,
that
up,
problem,
and
too.
it's
I want to change gears a little bit, but it's somewhat connected to the idea of rebooting that Mitsubishi plant with Rivian. I mean, that's a plant that ideally for the people involved will have a future, right? But we're just looking at a market in North America, or certainly the U.S., that looks like it's not going to grow a lot, at least not near term. I was at a conference yesterday at the Federal Reserve Office in Detroit, downtown Detroit, where Kristen Dichek was saying there's 3 million vehicles worth of excess capacity in North America, and she said GM owns about 1 million of that. But there's there's a story here of kind of excess capacity in a relatively flat market. I mean, as you look at the kind of the manufacturing setup in North America and kind of relatively speaking aged plants, how do you see that evolving? I mean, we're going to see more plant shutdowns as technology gets better, or do you think that these companies are going to figure out a way to fill these plants up? Just sort of as you look at that and talk to your customers, I mean, which way do you see that going?
What's interesting is everybody seems to think an assembly plant is forever, especially when it's in your neighborhood and you've got all these nice jobs.
Or you
and all that.
represent the district it happens to be in.
All assembly plants, like most manufacturing plants, have a life cycle. They're born, they're profitable, they have their standard years, but then they hit their golden years, and the equipment starts to wear out, all the building systems get old. The initial heavy investment in manufacturing equipment, conveying systems and things that don't normally get changed over start to get very, very old. Then you have other changes, how materials have been delivered in more efficient ways to work, equipment needing to get larger. And then they become inefficient to operate. They've gotten old, and then they die.
So put some time on that. I mean, the Diamond Star plant is 30 years old. It was opened in 1988.
The studies that I have done show that the economic life of the brick and mortar side of an assembly plant's 25 years. After that, it starts to become a drag on operations, and then you get tied down into a question of whether or not the vehicle that's currently produced in there is going to continue, whether the equipment is worth reinvesting. But then the last straw for almost every assembly plant that dies, not all, but generally speaking, is the paint shop. Paint shops are lucky to live 25 years. Changes in technology, needs to reduce emissions and everything else, plus simply the environment that they work in, which is reasonable humidity, there's water, other things. They tend to corrode, they get old, and then you wind up having to replace it. And a paint shop, it's going to be a quick 500 million. And in many cases, the site does not easily accommodate adding another paint shop, which means the plant's going to then be shut down and you're going to have that drain. And in the end, it's like, okay, it's time to do a new assembly plant. Now, in some cases, they get built nearby. FCA is a great example of that. Look what they've done with Jefferson North, replacing old Jefferson, the Toledo assembly plant complex replacing the old Jeep plant, and so on. Others will pick up, and then they go down to the south. They go to Mexico, or they go overseas and import vehicles. And you have to remember, too, if you're going to start to look at assembly plant capacity, the real question is worldwide assembly plant capacity. That's where all those trade arguments come from.
Well, I was going to say, 3 years ago, I would have totally bought into what you just said. Now I wonder if we're getting back to a, regional bubble kind of approach because there's so much trade tension, and shipping vehicles from one region to another is going to become unacceptable.
A wise individual, and going back, we were looking at doing, as program manager, to actually do a turnkey assembly plant back in the early 90s. Program got canceled. It was a European manufacturer who wanted to build one actually in Mexico. Got canceled because of the 92 downturn. But he looked at me and he said, the financial guys will tell you we'll locate it in a certain place because we've got a quick economic payback from wage rates. But if you look worldwide, wage rates for assembly plant workers tend to rise and catch up worldwide. The U.S. has been higher than most because if you go back to the closed market we had in the 50s and early 60s, the UAW built a protected position, and that's when you had people, the blue-collar worker on the line, made real good money.
Yeah.
But now, if you look at it, wage rates in Mexico are coming up, wage rates in China are coming up. Okay, you have other things in the supply base. Do we have equal pollution control and all kinds of other sourcing things? You can get back to the competitiveness of nations. You go back to strategy and Porter, going back to the 80s. Who's got raw materials? Where are the raw materials? North America is almost ideally suited to be a place to build vehicles because of those long-term competitiveness factors.
But let's go back to what Joe was asking about, and I think this is a really interesting point, especially as we're seeing these changes. What is your sense of the capability of many of the assembly plants that exist in the United States to be able to be sufficiently flexible, or dare I say, agile enough?
You could say agile. But
to be able to accommodate shifts in market demands to be able to accommodate whether it's style of vehicle or volume of vehicle?
Volume of vehicle is a bigger influence. Style, going back to what we discussed, the assembly process doesn't change that much.
Well, there was
you
that
see
big
more
word that
aluminum,
the
et cetera.
would
That's
go
the
to
equipment.
Belvedere because of the paint shop.
Yeah,
Paint
because of the
can.
paint
It's always
shops and all that,
paint.
but that's the common part. Volumes is a very big driver of that, but if you look, all the manufacturers are trying to do common platforms so they can build volume in a given assembly plant.
And flex
And
across
they can
different
flex things
styles
back
of
and
vehicle.
forth in the models.
Okay, but are they good? Are they good at doing that? Or are
Some
they
are
just
much
good
better
at
than
saying
others.
that? Okay, so
Some are
who's
much-
good at doing that?
Some are much better than others.
And who are the some?
I think you know who they really are, but if
I
you
want you
look
to
at
say
it,
it.
if you were to look at it, it goes back to how good are they at flexing vehicle design, how many platforms do they have, and what's the flexibility of those. And if you look at the traditional Detroit manufacturers, they've had less flexibility in platforms as compared to others. Some have pushed for better platform commonality, but they don't have platform commonality like Volkswagen does or like Toyota's driving to. Now, General Motors, going back to the late 90s when they did their original work on bill of material, bill of process, actually drove to the point where while the platform was different, at least it went together in much the same manner. And that can get you a lot of the same efficiencies. But if they when they start to deviate from that, they go to the whatever considerations they have short term. Oh yeah, I know we really wanted to do it this way, but we're going to save money on this short term program and we're going to do it different, and you're dead.
So let me ask you this. So one of the things, I mean, forever, I've listened to people at different car companies talk about sort of their efforts to kind of gain a significant competitive advantage, as you mentioned, by consolidating platforms, by going to, common bill of process and all this stuff. Lean production, was an actual competitive advantage, for real competitive advantage for the Japanese companies for a while until everybody else kind of figured it out. Where is they going to find competitive advantage in the next 10 years? I mean, if everybody at least has access to the concepts around lean production, everybody has access to the same robotics, everybody has, everybody will tell you they're going to a common platform. It seems like there's no road to a real competitive advantage, or is there? And what is it if there is?
They could hire Mike.
Well, they hire, besides hiring you, you're not allowed to say hire you.
An opportunity,
That's
but-
not allowed. What's after that?
It's still back to worldwide sourcing because a very large portion of the cost content comes from the supply base. It's finding the right suppliers who keep coming down those cost curves in the right location, and in general, then on the innovations. And then go back and look, where's my cost? Well, you can, in many ways, look at the cost of a car on a per pound basis. And it's hard to compete and get large-scale advantage from that. You get small incremental advantage, and it's sweat every day, fear every corner, and keep your nose to the grindstone. And that is, in many ways, a national cultural issue. You keep swatting for the grand slam, you're going to miss out on doing all those things that lead you to being truly cost competitive.
This is why Wall Street hates car companies, right? Because it's a pennies per car kind of a game.
Absolutely. It's never going to be better than that. It's marginal, and with any luck, what every car company's hoping for is that their return on capital exceeds the cost of capital.
Right. Well, it's interesting though. In this, I mean, we were talking earlier about electric cars, and I'm not against electric cars. I'm fascinated by them. I expect to see some really nice ones when I go to the Frankfurt Auto Show. But the volume of discussion and promotion of electric cars is up to 11, way out of proportion to the amount of profit that they generate, which is negative. And certainly in this market, and I think elsewhere, what still makes the bucks is some of the oldest technology around. It's pickup trucks in the United States, right? It's body on frame V8 in the front, or if 6 if you're at Ford. And it just seems like that disconnect has got to be really hard for the auto companies because they're being pushed toward a technology that makes no money, and yet they have to feed with capital and investment and innovation this older technology that makes all the dough. Balancing that's hard.
The drive and where you will see the greatest success for what I will call non-economically competitive vehicles is where politicians make them economically competitive. You ban gasoline cars or diesel cars from the city and you have to have electric, well then, what are you going to do?
That's,
But let me ask you this. I want to state it in a different way. Okay, and this
Okay.
would be a pure manufacturing engineering approach to this.
All right.
Okay, so the argument being electric cars don't make any money. To what extent do electric cars not make any money, but big old V8s are making money? Because basically there's a lot of sunk cost in terms of the plant and infrastructure and knowledge and know-how in terms of building internal combustion engines, and we have virtually no scale when it comes to building vehicle-sized electric motors and batteries.
The problem with batteries is a technology problem, not a scale problem. It's a cost of the materials, cost of the technology, and everything else. The same with motors. We've been building electric motors for a long time.
But
You
there's a
can
difference
build-
between
you
a
can
washing
build a-
machine and an electric vehicle.
The electric vehicle, the drive now is not to do with the technology of building the motor. It's making the motor electrically efficient enough to make it work with a battery that's not chemically or other process-wise efficient enough to work in the environment. The majority of the car is the same. Where does the profitability in these other vehicles come from? Well, let's talk about cars. Everybody's talking about we have everybody exiting the car business because it's not profitable. Where's the profit right now? It's in large SUVs and pickup trucks, and it's because certain competitors have not yet brought to market products that are competitive. So it's all pricing premium.
well, and in the United States,
In the United
specifically,
States.
you have also a 25% tariff barrier.
You have your chicken tax.
We have your chicken tax, which is a
So Joe is going to go
fine
to
thing.
Frankfurt next week, and he's going to be at the world public introduction of the Volkswagen ID.3. Okay,
among others.
but I mean that is
Yeah.
that is the that's going to be the showcase, right? So Volkswagen has basically said, okay, we've engineered this thing specifically to be an electric vehicle. We've engineered this such that we will be able to have variants coming off of it. We have set up because I forget who did we had somebody on the show who was talking. Maybe it was Oliver was talking about the vertical integration at Volkswagen. It's just astonishing compared to any other company. Okay,
Except Toyota.
and so they have the wherewithal to make motors and batteries and
Sure.
everything, right? I've got to believe they're saying to themselves, you know what, we're going to make money off this one day.
They have to, because what you're leaving out of that equation is where is their market? Their market is principally in two locations where the political side of things is driving to electric vehicles regardless of the cost, China and the EU.
Okay, but that's a reality on the ground. So if we were to say that if you invented a nuclear-powered car right now, you probably couldn't sell it here, I'm just guessing,
Probably not.
right? So that
We're
would be- that-
economically driven. We don't have politicians driving the way China is right now because they have a resource problem for fuels. They have a pollution problem for burning combustion engines, and Lord only knows they still have it for power plants. We have the EU that's driving green as well. For Volkswagen, it's strategically very important to build vehicles in the size range and the capabilities to meet the demands that are coming in reality in their marketplace, where it's being done regardless of cost.
But with what you know about their MEB strategy, I mean, do you think that they have a realistic shot at sort of cracking the code on mass market or above mass market vehicles that actually can be profitable? Because that seems to be the big question.
The question is if the market has to be electric because it's being driven that way by external forces. You simply have to be better than than your competitors to succeed.
Better-
Not that you have to be
Right.
perfect on an absolute basis. They just have to be better than the mainstream Chinese competitors or other European competitors, and they'll be profitable.
Okay, we got to come back and pick up more of this conversation, but we're going to take another break because another good sponsor of the show is Lear, and here's what they have to say.
Lear Connexus offers a parental controls application with geofencing that sends notifications regarding driving behavior and location, including curfew alerts, acceleration alerts, and speed alerts, all delivered to a smartphone application that includes vehicle location, driver notifications, and a report card of driving history, including notifications when predefined geographic boundaries are crossed. For more information, visit Lear.com.
All right, we're talking all things engineering and production and all kinds of stuff with Mike Tracy from the Agile Group, and we're going to get back to that in a minute, but this is the time of the show when Dr. Data makes his appearance.
Uh-oh.
Okay, so, if, John, I'm convinced you'll get this even before I even read the
Boy,
slide.
I better after a setup like that.
I have no question. And then, you may be stepped on by either of these two guys at the same time that are saying it. So Katie, please bring up the first slide. So, okay, I'm not talking about Costco here. Okay, so in 1954, we had 35% membership. In 2018, we had 10.5% membership.
Membership.
I'm going to say unions.
Ooh, good guess, Joe. UAW membership
UAW membership.
UAW.
Yeah.
of the automotive workforce.
Yeah.
Katie? So,
Maybe a trade.
Or a
union.
trade
okay.
Yeah, come on, give it to me. I
here's,
said
now
union.
here's, okay, but here's the thing that I find to be rather astonishing. Okay, I mean, Katie? So, as of a recent study by the Pew Research Center, 55% of Americans have a favorable view of unions and 33% have an unfavorable view of unions. Yet, you saw how in 1954, there were 5 times more union members.
You're going to need a bigger show.
Yeah.
It takes a long time to change direction on an aircraft carrier.
Yeah. But one other thing, too, is if you go back to 1954, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but manufacturing made up a way bigger part of the U.S. economy than
Yes.
it does today. Today, it's what, 10% of the U.S. economy? So that explains so much of it right there.
But why the favorable, unfavorable?
That's a good question. And Joe might be right. That might be a whole nother show.
The economic power of the workforce is what drives the ability of the union to be successful. You're going to see that in the negotiations and what's going to come up now, so we can talk about that afterwards.
With the UAW
With the
contract.
UAW
right
contract and all that. Now bring that up. We'll let you finish your data first.
That was it.
now.
That was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In that case, we'll go on.
Yeah.
Okay,
But yeah, I'd love to come back after we see how the union UAW does in this latest round of
Which-
talks.
Right.
Which
Visit
the
us.
leverage they have is the ability of a concentrated group to cause economic distress to a corporation or an industry. An assembly plant like Arlington goes out on strike, the most single profitable assembly plant in the world.
So this is the
You've
General
got
Motors
leverage.
plant in Texas that makes trucks and
Escalade.
large-
SUVs
Cadillac
only.
Escalades and
Large
Tahoes and-
It is the single most profitable assembly plant in the world. And you've got 3,000 people that can take that plant down and make General Motors numbers look really bad. You strike a Walmart store, whoopee. You haven't got leverage.
Well, but if you're working at Walmart, it is a whoopee.
No,
You know,
not
but
for long.
the way the laws are now, they can restructure the workforce, they could close the store in some ways, they can do all kinds of things. General Motors is not going to be closing Arlington.
So,
It's leverage.
I know it's easy to dump on the UAW and
Don't
people who
dump it on
don't.
it. That's
getting that
normal
direction.
economic force.
So I looked
I'm
to
not
see.
dumping on the UAW. I agree with Mike about the leverage.
They have
issue.
leverage, but I was looking, and we think, oh, the squad strike is not a problem. This is according to the UAW website as of today. Weekly strike pay is $250 per week, $50 a day, Monday through Friday, beginning on the 8th day of the strike. On January 1st, 2020, strike pay will rise to $275 per week. Now, just think of some guy who's got a household,
Let's
who's
go
got a
back to
family.
Arlington, and I'll use Arlington as a perfect
It's
example.
not a good- I mean, people
It has
don't wanna
been-
do that.
No, When you look at, when the union goes out on strike, the workforce at Arlington is likely to be the first to go if they do go out on strike.
Or the engine
Those
plant
people-
that supplies them.
Or the engine, no. The engine plant that supplies them would work. The people at Arlington have been working maximum overtime for I forget how many years now.
About a decade.
About a decade. Having some time off actually is going to feel good to them. Right now, they run them to the maximum overtime that the people can tolerate because it's so profitable to do so.
And you might have this in your data book there, but I think the inventories of the large GM trucks and SUVs is fairly heavy right now.
Gee, I'm shocked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that
Truly
happens.
shocked.
That was just a coincidence that they
Yeah.
built up inventory. Right?
Yeah.
That, well, might have something to do with sales rates as well, but that's a different side of the problem. But yeah, they've been cranking everything out
Yeah.
at maximum rate there. They know what's coming.
Yeah.
Have you bought braces recently? This guy's making $250 a week. He's got a problem.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Yeah, look, I mean, I've covered this stuff for a while, and I absolutely, I don't think the UAW is strike happy. I think they learned a very difficult lesson along the lines you're suggesting in 1998
Yes.
when they walked out and they harmed them. They harmed their members, and they know it, and they harmed GM grievously, and they know it. Nobody wants to do that, right? But you do what you have to do to kind of get something that you can ratify. And so it's tactics, and Mike, I agree with you that the people involved kind of know their roles. And that doesn't mean it doesn't get out of control, but we'll see. I mean, everything I just said could be rendered, completely obsolete by events in 2 weeks, but I just feel like, they know that 250 doesn't float it for their members, but they also
Their
know how to do
members
this.
have been saving up in large measure for this to some extent and so on. The question you have to ask yourself, too, is what is it that they're going to strike for? What are their key requirements in a contract? And is it really that far out of line with what General Motors would like to achieve or not?
Well, this goes back to what you were saying, Joe, about the 3 million unit overcapacity in the United States, right? I mean, isn't that fundamentally going to be the issue?
It's part of it.
It's part of it.
With
Job
GM.
security has always been a major issue, but that's a limited selection of plants, too, and those aren't the ones that are going to go out on strike.
Right, but I mean, in terms of the contract, what
In terms of the contract,
overall,
what they're driving for, they're going to go for preservation of their lifestyle, their benefits. They're not going to want to have more money taken out for their insurance benefits and so on. They're going to want to have some measure of job security. It won't be the jobs bank, but they don't want any more sudden surprises that's going to hurt their ability to live and be happy, and that's what's going to drive the solution.
John, are they going to strike or not strike?
I think there's a strike coming. And I say that because the rank and file doesn't trust its leadership right now. They just flat out, or enough of them don't trust their leadership, that I think unless the leadership delivers a sweetheart of a contract, they're going to say, you guys didn't take these companies
Well, that's
down.
what happened
to
the last time. They lost at FCA.
Yeah, but it was
Had to
quickly
re-
revoted.
Yeah, they had to reboot it. Yeah.
They got it. But and you hit on the key ones that they're looking for, Mike. Job security. They don't want more co-pays. They want to preserve their pension. They want higher wages.
Well, and there's one other thing that I think they've shown in the past, that they want commitments of investment. And over time, the companies have tended to do that. Kristen Dichek, again, I just want to give credit where credit is due. She has a chart that shows that in the fourth quarter, of every contract year, sort of announced investment. And we saw this the last time, right? What do you know? We're going to invest $5 billion. And GM was going to invest whatever it was, $5 billion in their new truck program.
Sure.
Regardless.
Anyway.
They were going
That
to do
was
that.
decided years ago.
But they kind of kept that. And then, look, here we have this giant investment to show our commitment to the union and to our workforce, which is all fine, but that's kind of how the game is played.
It's all part of job security.
Yeah.
That's
It
the
is.
job security side.
But we've talked about what the UAW wants. What General Motors wants in this case is lower labor costs. And what they'll point to is, hey, all the transplants use way more temporary workers than we're able to do. GM has an extraordinarily high, what they officially call unscheduled absence problem.
That's a
I
big
call
deal.
it AWOL.
Yeah, that's a big deal
GM
for
says
them.
12% average at its plants.
Which creates overstaffing, which
Way over.
causes
all kinds of issues.
That's crazy. GM also on a fully accounted labor cost basis has the highest labor costs in the country. They're paying roughly $60 an hour. The transplants are at $50 an hour. So GM needs something if it's going to remain competitive and is going to continue making these capital investments. And it comes down to what you said, Mike. Where's the balance? How do you get the union what it wants to a degree and give GM what it needs to a degree that you say, yeah, let's sign?
Go back to Gary's reference to the UAW's page on strike. You'll notice that if you're a temp and you haven't already applied for membership and so on, you don't get anything. The union will sacrifice the temps because
They're temps.
they're temps.
Right.
And they'll be willing to take some measure of temps and so on and so forth. They'll take it there. There might be some small give, but I don't think, if you really get down to it, insurance and the co-pays and all that, that's really a hard point for them. General Motors is going to have to deal with that and then hope that the federal government's going to figure out something. We'll all give that the 0.003% chance that will happen, but they'll deal with that. And then their only remaining problem is what to do with capacity, and they did that last fall.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to another
Yeah,
subject.
there's
And
a
by the
bunch of
way,
things you wanted to get to.
temps are included as long as they pay the union dues, but
That's
that's
right.
not.
They have to pay their union. They have to be
But it's-
applied and pay the union dues, and
Right,
they don't.
but it specifically says temporary employees, so I just wanted to make that clear
Yeah,
for
that's right.
our friends out there. So you.
Yeah, no, I understand. But
I don't
So
want-
Gary, you
I
had,
don't
you
want-
had a couple of things.
All right,
you thought we
so
should get into.
we've been talking about Germans and we've been talking about electric vehicles, and we've got to talk about the Taycan that was introduced this week in a global introduction in Niagara Falls of all places. Why did they do it in Niagara Falls, I wonder?
Hydropower.
Hydropower.
Yeah, exactly.
Clean
That's
power.
exactly
Yeah, they didn't do it in
You
front of
don't-
a coal plant.
You don't want, right, you don't want a coal-fired Taycan. That's
all the
not good.
coal miners that lost their jobs in the Ruhr are now celebrating.
All right, so here we have this car, and so it's once again a Tesla killer. Okay, every time somebody comes out with an electric vehicle, it's a Tesla killer. Is this a Tesla killer, John?
No. I mean, this isn't going to kill Tesla. But there's going to be a lot of people who've got the money because these things are pricey. I mean, $150,000, $180,000 for these things.
185.
So in wealthy communities where everybody has already had their Model S or Model X or 3, this is going to be the hot new thing to have.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's overdue for Porsche. I mean, let's be direct and say they are late to this party, late to the kind of the discovery that Elon Musk made years ago that electric vehicles should be premium vehicles. That said, yeah, I think they'll do just fine with this. And the question is whether I think they'll also hurt the Model S. They really do. The Model S looks a little old.
Portion.
But it's not. But the car market's more complicated than that. Somebody who buys a Taycan might have walked away from a Range Rover, or walked away from a Ferrari. So, or whatever. I mean, any other type of vehicle would have said, you know what, I'm going to buy the Taycan instead because it's cooler, it's electric, it's a Porsche. So I think it's going to be not a linear sort of Tesla, Porsche wins, Tesla loses. But
What percentage of people buy a Tesla because of the sensor technology, because of the stack that's the screen and all that, things that you're not going to see in the Taycan? So, I mean, by taking away features that are in a Tesla, I mean, that's a chunk of the market that they're not going to address or even try to
I agree
steal.
with that. I think that's right. I mean, look, I think they're going to get their share. I think they'll sell the ones they expect to build at that price. I think the real test is, down the road as Porsche and other European brands begin to bring credible, proper premium vehicles that are electric. Then kind of does the market get bigger and everybody's happy, or is it a static market and you get into a market share war? I don't know.
Well,
which.
remember, all market share has got to come to 100%. So if you look at the players in the EV segment right now, as more and more companies come into that segment, Tesla is going to lose market share. That's not necessarily bad as long as it keeps growing
They can
sales.
sell, what, $1
They
million
want
a
to
year?
they want to meet their volume targets at their margin targets, and that is where their problem is.
Right. They can't make money right now.
Can't sell enough vehicles at enough margin to make money. Nor are they likely to.
So interestingly enough, in terms of people who are interested in buying the Model S or the Taycan, this Autolist.com surveyed 1,500 current car shoppers ahead of the global debut of the Taycan on September 4th and asked them which of the two electric sedans they would choose and why. 45% of consumers said they'd pick the Model S, 33% said they'd pick the Porsche, and 22% said they were unsure. So,
What was their sample base and how?
1,500 current car shoppers,
Yeah, shopping for what kind of car?
apparently for electric cars.
If they're shopping for an electric car, that's not a Porsche market. Porsche is marketing an electric Porsche, not an electric car.
And Tesla's marketing a Tesla.
Okay, I
Right.
know we got more topics to get to, but one more break right here from our good friends at Bridgestone. Okay, we're back. Talking about what, Gary?
Mike, remind me to tell you about Elon's original factory plan.
His original factory was almost a CKD plant to be built in New Mexico.
So this is basically for those who
That
don't know
was
what
what he originally
CKD
submitted
means.
to the
This is-
DOE.
You put together parts of
Parts,
something.
just in a final quick assembly and all that to build low volume in a small plant. He wound up with a volume plant. I would suspect that somewhere along the line, the economics of the business occurred to him and everybody else. He essentially, in the factory side, through the luck of the draw, however you want to get into how that deal happened, did the same thing that Rivian's doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they only did that because Rivian could buy the plant for nothing, and Tesla was essentially gifted the NUMMI plant
By
by
Toyota.
Toyota.
That's right. Essentially, those are the strategies that are working. Would we like to talk about Faraday?
No, because they're not doing anything.
They're not doing anything because building a grand and glorious plant wasn't economically feasible. You want to get in the car business, you better figure out a way to avoid a big chunk of the investment and a big chunk of time it takes to do it.
Absolutely. Truer words were never spoken. Gary, what else you got that
All right.
should be?
We had sales this week. Obviously, we didn't have sales from everyone because now the Detroit 3 is not reporting their sales on a monthly basis, but they're doing it on a quarterly basis. But we saw some pretty significant increases. Toyota was up 11%, Nissan was up 13%, Honda was up 18%, and Hyundai was up 12%. What do you take it? What's your...
The market came in strong, really strong. It was a 17 million SAR, way above all the analysts' expectations.
Labor Day was in August.
Labor Day was, this year we got the full Labor Day weekend.
Right.
Last year we only had Friday of
Right.
the weekend in the numbers. But on a daily selling rate basis, the market was up
Still good.
6.6%. That's the biggest gain all year long.
Wow,
And what it blows me away is every single month, all the analysts say the sales are going down, this is going to be a bad year. Well, guess what? Sales are even Steven with last year. In fact, they're up a fraction. And last year, everybody said was a pretty good year. So I'm just blown away that the analysts continue to get it wrong every single month. And you can talk, incentives are up. They're up a little bit. And yeah, there was this thing with the full weekend for August. But I'm talking full 8 months this year versus full 8 months last year. We're even Steven with last year. I think it's a pretty good market.
You know, what's really astonishing to me was that, we all know midsize sedans are dead and no one would ever buy a midsize sedan unless there were
Wait, I think I know what's coming. Go for it.
Where am I going to hear this from?
But Accord and Camry sales are both up.
It was a strong month. Just about everything was up.
Were these people crazy?
Well,
Didn't anybody tell them? They got to buy an SUV?
Yeah, first of all, I honestly don't know what was going on with the sales of those two vehicles. Although, as you have competitors drop out of a segment you dominate, you would think that at some point that would be helpful to them. But,
What's the analysis? The Camry is still the gold standard.
yeah, and the
Right,
Ford,
but I mean,
Ford's
but-
not a bad vehicle either.
Right,
Ford's
but
not a bad
it's
vehicle,
just-
but
it just
Ford is
seems
a
like-
dated vehicle.
But it seemed like those, like if we looked at the numbers of both Accord and Camry over the past several months, they were both. and now, I mean, they're showing robust.
Well, let's see how they go for the year, and I'd still like to see, and to your point, since GM, Ford, Chrysler don't report only on quarterly now, it'd be interesting to see where total pass car market share is and if it's really going up or not.
Yeah. Start to drive up
No,
the pricing.
I agree that the market is pretty resilient, and more resilient, I think, than a lot of people, including myself, thought it was going to be. So the underlying economy maybe isn't as weak, at least for those people who can afford a new car.
Confidence level.
Yeah.
That's really what it boils down to.
Yeah. I think and it'll be interesting to see over the rest of the year how that plays out.
But I mean, just to look for just at Toyota last August versus this August, okay? Last August, it's passenger cars. This is just cars, not including trucks at all or SUVs or anything like that. Passenger car sales were 78,410. This August, 83,765.
That's a nice bump up. Yeah, no, that's a good bump up. But this is, it'd be interesting. I can't do the math in my head. Is that about a 6.6% increase? Because I'm saying when the whole market goes up, that's a big increase. All the boats go up with that tide.
Did you work it out in your head? Because I know that you are.
It's not quite that much, but you're close. It's relatively close in that percentage. What you really look at too is the ability to flex back and forth on volumes for Toyota and Honda between cars and SUVs is much better too. They're less sensitive to that.
That's right. No, that's absolutely true. What else you got, Gary?
Well, speaking of things going away, it seems that the Fiat 500 is going to be leaving the United States.
Oh, there's a
Shocking. Shocking.
Smelling salt required here, Joe.
No, not really.
All right, so here's my question to you. Does Fiat have a future in the U.S. market?
Maybe as a electric vehicle or some sort of specialty niche product, but it's very niche, and maybe not. The last time I asked the people at FCA about this, there was a lot of tap dancing going on.
Yeah.
It won't be a Fiat, and it'll be sold under an existing brand name through an existing channel because no dealer is going to deal with that kind of volume and all that.
Yeah.
So it'll just have a different badge on it. But you want to talk about that. Now that's part of your excess capacity problem because now Toluca's under capacity too.
So, Gary, I knew you were going to ask about this, so I did a little bit of math. So far this year, Fiat in the U.S. has sold 6,900 cars. In 8 months, 6,900. That means, on average, their dealers sold 18 cars a month. Now, some dealers did better, some did worse. You can't survive on 18 cars a month. In August, if I got my math done right here, the dealers sold 2.5 cars average.
Yeah, that's not
You can't
sustainable.
survive on that.
No.
So when you ask, can Fiat survive? They can't because the dealers can't survive on that. It's impossible.
Yeah.
In fact, if you want to go along, Alfa has only sold a little over 12,000 cars this year. That's 145 cars per dealer per month. I put to you that a dealer cannot survive on that either. So it's not a matter of saying we're going to have more product coming and all that. Honestly, I think the plan is just keep things going, because if we shut the brand down, we got to buy the dealers out. We got to buy their franchises out.
buy back
If
all.
we just let things keep on rolling, they're
Let
going to
them
quit.
sit on their
and
own.
we don't have to buy them out.
So does this mean that Sergio is not going to be canonized?
Not for that.
Not for that.
I
I
mean,
think he might be
should have sold it to
canonized for
Volkswagen
greenlighting the
when he
Ram interior.
Oh, look, Sergio did a brilliant job with FCA. And how he's been able to pull Fiat along with it. But putting the Fiat brand in the U.S., it just didn't work.
Okay, but
it was a good idea.
but
It didn't work.
But the F part of FCA.
Well, I said it's on the show before, early in the year. Time to take the F out of FCA. I mean,
And then figure out which company is going to buy the remainder.
you're not going to sell it to anybody. Maybe some Chinese guys with money would buy it.
Who would buy?
Who would buy it?
Who would
It doesn't
buy
make any
a
money.
Jeep and truck franchise is what I'm talking about.
Well, yeah,
There'd be a
Get
long
rid of
line.
the, get rid of the money-losing side of the business, and now you've got something that would sell for a lot of money.
Okay, do you think this is even conceivable, Mike?
Yes. It's almost inevitable.
But very
What's
difficult.
Fiat's success rate going to be in Europe on the long term?
It's going to be hard. But it's going to be very difficult. I mean, this is something that people at FCA have said. Sergio certainly said it. It's very difficult for the Fiat and the Agnelli family to just abandon Italy. I mean, it's difficult on a bunch of different levels, politically, personally, financially. That's not an easy call. I mean, these people aren't,
They've
just
been
a bunch.
selling off the pieces of the empire, though, as they've been going on.
That is true. The
And it's getting
restructuring
it
is
down and going back to that old side of things. You let it just dwindle away.
Yeah,
So
look,
what is the name of the company that owns it all?
Exor.
Exor.
Okay, so is it conceivable that Exor could sell Jeep and Ram to whomever, and that it could just simply keep?
I'll tell you what the people inside FCA told me. What do you do with the stump? Once you sell off
the
all the
question.
profit-making stuff,
question.
what do you do with the stump?
Yeah, and
If
that's
it wasn't for the F, it would have all been sold by now. The only,
Yeah.
it's worth it.
Yeah, I mean, look, inconceivable. I mean, we learned a long time ago that you can't say stuff like that in this business. But I do think that a lot of analysts who say, oh, you could, cut here, cut there, throw this out, do that. It's hard politically. And as I said, in other dimensions, I think it's really going to be hard for the Exor, which is essentially the Agnelli family, to basically throw this institution that's central to Italy's economy under the bus and just walk away as if it was no big deal. That's
see,
just,
this-
I
this
just
is
don't
why-
see that. I don't see that.
This is why they're making Jeep Renegades in Italy.
Exactly.
And that's the solution
They're
for
gonna try to do
FCA
that.
in Italy, is move more Jeep product. Could you do some Ram stuff? I don't know. On the commercial side, they're doing fine, but
Yeah.
the Fiat brand,
Yeah.
geez, it takes a lot of capital and it doesn't provide any return.
Yeah.
The Fiat brand is dying. It's dying in Europe. It's dying everywhere except Italy, and Italy is not doing
And
that
Brazil,
well either.
strong in Brazil.
It's strong in Brazil, yeah, which is
But
not
again,
the greatest market anyway.
It's more Jeep that's bailing them out in
Yeah.
Brazil. So
if you look at it, if you do a strategic analysis of large car companies, let's see now, which large car companies could do with competitive full-size trucks in America and a worldwide brand called Jeep?
It's a number.
A number of
It's
them.
actually,
What
yeah.
keeps them from doing it? The family and Fiat.
no, like,
I mean,
like Joe said,
I
they
mean,
can't walk away from it.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
certainly, I mean, look, who knows what's going to happen with this, this kind
Merger?
of merger deal with Renault. I mean, that's. But
Do you think that's back?
I think that. I mean, again, it's just no secret to anybody who follows the news. I mean, Fiat, Mike Manley and John Elkann, the chairman, have both left the door wide open with the proviso that Renault and Nissan and the French government get their act together. The French government gets out of the way. Right, and
That's not gonna happen, though.
Mike's shaking his head, right, saying, "Yeah, when will that happen?" But I mean, they're certainly all for it if they can get the right conditions. And among the companies that would love to get their hands on Jeep and the North American truck business, Renault certainly has to be one, and all that whole alliance.
Needed to replace Nissan.
Yeah. it would be-
Really, and if you get down to it, otherwise Renault will die off as well.
Hey, we're down to the very end here. We
What
got
about Mitsubishi?
we got a few questions from the audience. B. Wilson for Web says, Mike, what are the strengths and weaknesses of the Tesla tent at Fremont?
Low cost enclosure is a strength. The weakness,
It's not good in the winter.
you don't have winter in Fremont to speak of. There's rainy periods and all of that, but what's the weakness? It's symptomatic of the underlying engineering and planning failures of the company and their inability to effectively manage their manufacturing operations.
So this is manufacturing
good
engineering,
stuff.
not engineering.
Yeah,
Production engineering, not.
for a vehicle to go together well, and I know this gentleman by the name of Monroe, maybe you've heard of him.
As in
it has
Sandy?
first, it has to be designed to go together well. And that's a problem, especially
Along those lines, Barry Rector from Indy says, any suggestions for Elon and his production in NUMMI?
Hire Sandy Monroe to help him oversee the design and actually design a fully producible vehicle that can be built cost effectively.
Or you.
Well,
Hire
Mike
both
can be
of us.
part of the package. That's right. SubGR77 wants to know, is the gap in Corvette production due primarily to the paint shop upgrade?
No. The paint shop down there has some interesting technology, but it's basically due to a complete change in the build process. Essentially, it's an all-new paint shop. I haven't heard of any major issues. There were product design and producibility issues that led to the problems.
Okay, and Miro Kefert wants to know, why is it necessary for a startup to invest millions into plants and robots when 2 or 3 capable mechanics can build an ICE car from parts in less than a week and an EV in about 3 days?
If one was to look at the problem of trying to build cars, going back to what we've said, you'd also have people that were in the contract car business in the U.S. as compared to the few that there are in Europe, and you'll note that that one plant that was theoretically in the contract car business is now owned by a Chinese car company.
Okay, and one last one from Bob Wilson. What do you think of ISO 9000 that appears to be a toothless tiger?
ISO 9000 is a requirement for manufacturing and delivering in a number of markets. The automotive standard is basically a significant superset of ISO 9000 and is heavily used and in force. The biggest problem that you have with that is they know how to make the suppliers follow it. Car companies have a problem trying to comply with it in-house, which is a reason to outsource a lot of things.
That's right. That's exactly. But, you know, to your point, you cannot get a contract with a car company unless you're ISO 9000 certified.
Basically, principally 16949, the other standard, which is the true automotive standard. ISO 9000 is applicable to many consumer products and other activities. You can't sell into Europe without having that kind of certification in other locations.
Good. Gary, anything else?
Nope. After that fascinating discussion of ISO 9000,
Yeah.
I'm just breathless.
Was that the highlight of your day?
It was.
That's
I need a cold compress.
Yeah. Well, good. On that note,
Important things I let other people know about.
that's right. We'll wrap it up then. Mike, thanks so much for coming on. Really good having you. It was a great discussion. Some excellent insights there. And Joe, always good to have you on here. And Gary, we'll just keep on doing the show.
Indeed we will.
And I'll
Gives you something to do with your spare time.
yeah.
That's right.
And I'll continue to thank all of you for having tuned in.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion. Lear, a global leader in automotive seating and electrical systems. And by Borg Warner, propulsion solutions that support a clean, energy-efficient world.
Visit our website, Autoline.tv, where you can watch us live Thursday afternoons. Get your daily fix with Autoline Daily and in-depth analysis and interviews with Autoline This Week. There's all that and much more at Autoline.tv.